In this video, we're going to take a look at sculpting geometry. Now, sculpting geometry can be an incredibly powerful and useful tool. It does take a little while to get used to, but once you have the knack of it, you can really create some incredible looking things. So we're going to take our crow and set it up so that we can start sculpting on it. And we'll just go through some of the sculpting features. Most of the time, if we're actually sculpting some heavy detail into our geometry, it could take hours and hours to really get the look and feel that we're after. But again, in the end, it can look very realistic to your final model. Before I sculpt, I'm going to look here and I can see that I do have some history on the model. So I'm just going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, and delete all of that history. And the reason for doing this is so that I have a clean model to work with and that I'm not actually trying to sculpt on any of the previous changes that I may have made to the model itself. With my model selected, I can then choose Mesh Tools and go to Sculpting Tools. And you'll see that we have a full list of different types of sculpting tools to choose from. We have different hotkeys that will enable us to go to those tools quickly. Now, Maya has also set up all of these same tools outlined for us in a nice convenient area, and that's just our sculpting shelf. So I'm going to close this window here, and we can just go ahead and use our sculpting shelf. Click on the first one here, which is just the standard sculpting tool. Once I select it, you can see that we are sculpting, and it tells me the name of the model that I'm sculpting on, and it also turns the wireframe off. Now, there's a small dot in the middle of the screen there, or kind of moving over my object, and that's just my mouse. This is showing me the center of my sculpting brush. Yours might come through a little bit differently depending on what you've been doing or your preferences. But you can see here, there's another black circle kind of lingering out there. What is happening is that my brush size is just really large, so I can't see the entire thing. So I want to scale that down. To do so, I'm going to hold B and then click with the left mouse button and just drag to the left and scale that brush down. And if I drag to the right, that will increase the size of the brush. All right, so now it's a little bit more manageable. I'm also going to come back over to my sculpting tool itself and double click to open the tool options. Right at the top there, I have the brush size, so I could also scroll with the slider in order to get the size that I'm after. And we can change from world units or screen pixels, which could help us deal with objects of varying scales. So if it's really huge, we might choose some different options there just to get our brush into a usable scale or size. Next, we have the brush strength. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on my model. With that stroke, you can see that it pulled geometry out. And let's turn on our grid so we can kind of see. So the strength isn't measured in actual units, but instead this acts as a multiplier to our other options here, basically our distance or the amount of displacement we want to add to our model. So I'm going to take this down just a little bit here. And with a weaker brush, you can see we get a little bit of a different effect there. Now, I'm going to back out of my sculpting tool here. We can only sculpt on the vertices that we have in the model. So currently, we don't have a whole lot of vertices. Therefore, we can't get a whole lot of detail in the model itself. So I'm going to go to Mesh, and I'm going to choose Smooth, which will subdivide my geometry and give it a lot more vertices for me to play with. In the InView editor here, I'm going to increase this so that we have even more geometry. And we'll just take that up. Now I'm at 4. That's going to be pretty good. And we'll just choose Object, and I will delete my history. And then we're going to jump back into one of my sculpting tools. Click our standard tool there. And now I can sculpt and I can get more precision from the sculpt itself. Our graphics card is doing something funky here. Let's go ahead and just choose Use Default Material. I'm not too sure what coloring it was actually picking up there. Now, when I sculpt, I can actually get better looking detail. Obviously, nothing usable there just yet. let's take a look at some of the other tools that we have here. And we'll do just some really rough sculpting just to try to get a little bit of detail. And I'm going to grab our flatten brush. Just come up to the top here. We'll click on that. Come back to my model. And what we'll attempt to do here is we'll just kind of put a little eye socket in there. Now we need the eye to be on both sides. So we can go to mirror, mirror across object X. And now notice that I have two dots there for two different brushes. And I'm just going to go to the side here. We'll just hit it a little bit with our flatten brush. Now it's pushing it down in. You can barely see it there. So let's increase our strength just so that we get a bit more of an exaggerated effect. So you can see, kind of flattened it. Let's pull out kind of a round dot and let's use the foamy brush. It does kind of a buildup of the shape. So I'm going to go right into the middle there, create just a little roundness. You can see our strength is set way too high for this particular effect, so we're going to knock that down. Let's try a value of about 0.2 and see what we get. Make little circles just to build up geometry there. And we're just kind of creating a little bit of an eyeball. Now, the eye should be a little tighter than this, so I'm going to go and grab the pinch tool. Let's just test the brush and see where we're at. I'm going to increase the size a little bit. Try to go around the open area of the eye to pinch that geometry together. Trying to avoid the center there, but you can see how it pulls that together, and we can even increase our strength a bit. And so now we get a little bit of a creasing effect. And again, this is only going to work if we have geometry there to play with. That gives us a little bit of a round eye happening there, probably in the wrong spot of his head and not really to scale, but you can really see the effects that you can get. And if you were to take your time and actually use some reference material, you can get some really nice looking effects here. Now, another one that I really like here is steady stroke. I'm just going to go back to our standard brush here. I'm just going to sculpt a line. Let's decrease the effect of that by a lot. 0.2 again. So that kind of pulls out. We'll try to attempt here a line. So you can see we just kind of get that line there. But what we can do is turn on steady stroke and increase the distance if need be. But what this does is it creates a bit of a trail there, which makes it easier for you to draw a nice straight line. So if I increase that amount, you'll see that that line gets much greater, and it takes a little while for the brush to get going, but it averages the distance that you're creating that stroke. The sculpting tool, again, very powerful tool. There are lots of different options up here that you can play with, such as like with the imprint tool here, importing an image and using it as a stamp onto your model. So if I had a nice looking image of feathers, I could layer those feathers right down the wing and onto the rest of the body to get a nice look.